What's up, guys? We're here in the Turbo Dungeon, which is my basement. I wanted to make a quick little video. If you guys follow me on social media, you'll see what happened to my motor. It killed the thrust bearing. So I just wanted to make a little video showing what we think happened. Okay, so this is my old crankshaft. This is from the last motor. It hit the dirt there. But yeah, so first thing to notice about these crankshafts is they have a freeze out plug inside the crankshaft. It's just like a freeze out plug. If you stick your finger under here, yeah, there's a plug in there. So I did some research on why they do that. It's gun drilled to make it lightweight. Saves a little bit of weight, and it also helps with windage in the crankcase or whatever. Let me get my little flashlight here. So, yeah, if you look inside here, there's a plug, and you can see what happened was on this crankshaft, I was starting to get oil on my clutch. So, what we did to remedy that, we found, it was leaking oil from this plug. Is what it was doing. There was oil coming from the crankcase through that plug. So basically, man, just jammed a washer in there and gooped it up with silicone, and that fixed the problem. So we did the same thing on my new motor. Put the plug in there just as a precaution. No sense in killing another clutch. But so yeah, we did that, and then what I have here is my old bell housing. This is a small block Chevy bell housing, and it fits on an LS motor, and I needed this adapter plate to bolt the 6-speed to it. It's a different bolt pattern, so you need that adapter plate. Now, what happens is, with this adapter plate, the transmission is pushed, this is, I think, 1/2 inch thick. It's pushed about a 1/2 inch away from the engine, further away. Makes sense, right? So, as a consequence of that, the pilot bearing, goes in the crankshaft here, and the input shaft rides on that pilot bearing. And what happened was it was just barely riding on the pilot bearing. So my brother, in his MacGyver self, made this, and basically it's just a bearing retainer, presses into the crank and pushes the bearing out, and that's it. My problem was solved. The input shaft tip rode in there. It pushed the bearing out far enough so we had enough clearance, and it rode on the pilot bearing enough. So why is that important? That's important because now I have a new bell housing. I have a totally different bell housing now, and it's designed so you could just bolt the transmission to the bell housing. You don't need this adapter plate. Well, now that this adapter plate is gone, the transmission is that much closer to the engine. Makes sense. This adapter plate's not there. Now, as a consequence of that, we don't need this bearing retainer anymore. The pilot bearing just goes into the crank, and that's it. The problem is, now the tip of the input shaft was hitting here and pushing on the crank. And that is what we think caused the pilot bearing, not the pilot bearing, I'm sorry, caused the thrust bearing to wear out. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a self-inflicted wound. We did it to the last crank because it started leaking, and I ended up killing 2 clutches because of it before we figured out what the problem was. It was leaking oil onto the clutch. So, yeah, we just did the same thing. We jammed a washer in there, squeezed some silicone on it, and, we ran it. But in this case, the the input shaft, the tip of the input shaft where the pilot bearing rides, was actually hitting the crank. So yeah, that can't be. It can't be like that. I mean, it's only a little bit, but it was enough to wipe the bearing out. And yeah, so we're gonna remove that, seal it up with just some silicone, and run it. I got a new bearing for it, and yeah, we're gonna slap it together, check the clearances, and send it.